Alright lads, this video has been made possible due to my YouTube members. Thank you to all the gigachads currently on screen. The people we have to thank for the F-15 are surprisingly enough the Soviets. The unveiling of the MiG-25 at an airfield just outside of Moscow scared the shit out of the CIA and the US Air Force. The Americans were already working on the FX program, a vision for a Mach 2.5 jet with good maneuverability. And here were the Soviets already fielding such a jet. Now, we all know in hindsight that just like all Soviet creations, the MiG-25 was a heap of junk that barely functioned. But for the Americans, it came as a steel toe-cap boot up the arse. The US Navy responded with the F-14 Tomcat, and the US Air Force, after much infighting, finally produced a god, the F-15, the most successful fighter jet ever produced, with a staggering 104 confirmed kills, and not a single loss to enemy aircraft. The F-15 started its life as a high-altitude, high-speed radar missile flinger, back when semi-active radar missiles was part of the meta, I guess. Then in the 90s, the Americans did a real-life power creep and introduced both Link 16 and the AMRAAM. This turned even the most mediocre kinematic planes into highly lethal fighters, as the AMRAAM, data linked to an AWACS plane, kind of negated the need for planes like the F-15. A fast jet with a large powerful radar set wasn't really needed to get an accurate kill with the new AMRAAM AWACS combination. In War Thunder, we're still a long way away from those, but the F-15 solidified its reputation in the late Cold War, before Fox 3s were even a thing. Just something to bear in mind as War Thunder plunges ever further towards modernity. In War Thunder though, the F-15 is now the top tier fighter aircraft for 3 nations: the United States, Japan and Israel. All 3 of these nations essentially get a copy and paste plane, all getting the same engine, same 240 countermeasures and the same Fox 1 missile, only differing slightly in their loadouts. All 3 of these planes are going to set you back 410,000 research points, and on top of that, you've got a hefty cost of 1,100,000 silver lions for you to actually purchase the vehicle. They all sit at battle rating 12.3 in the 8th rank of their respective tech trees. All of our planes also have the same reward modifiers. Bear in mind, I do have a premium account. You can expect a silver lion modifier of 480% and an RP modifier of 512%. But if you purchase the talisman, this can be increased to 768%. It's also worth noting that these rewards are exactly the same as the F-15C. The Expert and Ace qualifications are also essential for anyone not wanting to get their cheeks clapped by an R27ER. It's going to set you back 1,100,000 silver lines for the Expert quali and 3,600 Golden Eagles for the Ace quali. The plane will of course come stock, meaning you are going to suffer greatly. It at least gets access to 2 AIM-9Ls when stock, and in the first rank of the modifications, you can unlock the 9L upgrade, allowing you to take 2 additional 9Ls into a match. In the second rank, we get the AIM-7Ms, but it isn't until rank 4 where we get the 9M, arguably the most potent missile currently in the game. And due to this plane lacking a lot of air-to-ground ordnance, you can't really speed up the grind by farming ground units. So lads, I'm very sorry to say this, but this is going to be a terrible stock grind. To be honest, the F-15 comes to War Thunder at a very awkward time. The Soviets created the Su-27 in response to the F-15, and yet it arrives in War Thunder in the same patch, and arguably is a much stronger aircraft in terms of flight performance, quality of weapons, and quantity of weapons. Regardless though, the F-15 comes in smoking with insane levels of acceleration and engine power, as well as an incredibly potent radar suite and a workable weapon selection. But just like the A-10, has the F-15 been overhyped and overpromised? Or is the F-15 worth the mammoth 400,000 XP grind? Well lads, if you'd like to find out, stick around for the rest of the video. The F-15 was designed from the very start to be an air superiority fighter. In fact, the Navy and the Air Force were basically screaming at each other due to the Navy wanting a multi-role fighter bomber and the Air Force wanting a pure breed air superiority fighter. In the end, Robert McNamara's retarded vision of a single airframe for both branches was binned, and the Air Force spawned a monster. In War Thunder, at least in the early stages of a game, your radar is going to be the moneymaker, and the F-15's AN/APG-63 is one of the best in the game. I'd say that the F-16C's is better, and it should be considering it's 30 years more modern, but for our purposes, the APG-63 will do nicely. It has a search zone of 60 degrees either side of the nose, which is double that of the F-16C's. This does mean that notching incoming missiles is quite hard though, especially against the Su-27 and its R-27ERs. As you can see, you cannot maintain a radar lock on an enemy whilst turning 90 degrees to them. This means that an Su-27 and his R-27ER is going to reach you first in a high level joust, and you won't be able to notch his missile while maintaining a lock on him. If you keep a lock, it's going to result in an unlubricated missile ending up somewhere you really don't want it to be, or it's going to force you to break lock and go defensive, giving him the initiative. The radar also has several different search modes. We have a regular search mode for enemies above you. When you first spawn in with the plane, it will be on the pulse Doppler search mode. I wouldn't recommend changing this as it is generally the best radar mode to be in. We do also have a pulse Doppler velocity, as well as pulse Doppler velocity head-on modes. As the name suggests, these are only useful against enemies that are flying towards you and cannot get a radar lock on enemies flying to the side and away from you, so I would not recommend using this whatsoever. The radar also gives us a radar gun sight or radar gun lead indicator. This makes it very easy to get accurate shots off, especially during those high angle deflection shots so common at top tier. The aiming is made even easier due to the F-15 using the M61A1 Vulcan minigun. We get over 900 rounds of ammunition for this gun, giving it the largest ammunition stockpile of any American plane I believe, so you can afford to spray a little bit with this cannon. But the main reason for looking at the radar is the guidance of our semi-active radar homing missiles. While people speculated that the F-15 would arrive with the AMRAAM A model, instead we're stuck with the good old AIM-7M. This is by no means a bad missile. In fact, against everything other than a certain Soviet missile, the Sparrow is top dog. The M variant has a theoretical maximum speed of Mach 4 and a constant wave seeker, meaning it won't easily be defeated by chaff. The missile can also pull 25 Gs. At high altitude, most jets will struggle to pull this, and you'll likely got a free kill on a space climbing window licker. But at lower altitudes, people will be able to defeat your Sparrow by just hugging the ground. The real reason that the R-27ER is so powerful is the speed of the missile. Compared to the Sparrow, the R-27 travels at Mach 5.8 and gives enemies much less time to react or die for the protection of low altitude. The R-27ER entered service in 1990, whereas the AIM-7M first flew with the US in 1977, so it definitely feels like gauging is giving one side a distinct advantage. All three of our F-15s get access to a total of 4 AIM-7Ms, carried on the belly of the aircraft. But semi-active missiles is only one side of the top tier coin. What about the IR missiles? Well, let's first talk about a notable absence, and that is the lack of a helmet-mounted display. This would allow you to slay the IR seeker of your missile, and is present on aircraft such as the F-16C, the Su-27, MiG-29, and the new Gripens. The HMD is a huge benefit in the cancer that is top tier matches, where both sides afterburn to the middle of the map, dump all of their missiles, and everyone is dead in 2 minutes after the first turn. The helmet mounted display allows you to fire IR missiles off of bore sight, where an Su-27 can launch an R-73 just by looking at you and with the free look camera. An F-15 pilot will have to get his nose onto the plane in question before launching. This slows fighting down significantly for the F-15 pilot. You can get around this by locking an enemy with your radar set, which will then slave the seeker of the missile onto the target. But this of course gives the enemy a warning, so unless they're brain dead, they're going to maneuver and at least pop flares to counter your missile. But what missiles are we actually firing? Well, all three planes get the AIM-9Ls when stock, but the Japanese and Israeli variants get access to their own unique missiles as upgrades. In the third rank of the modifications, the Japanese F-15J gets access to the brand new AAM-3 IR missile. This is arguably a clone of the AIM-9M, but with 10 Gs of additional overload. And as you can see from this video clip, the pull on launch is pretty insane. Like the 9M, the AAM has infrared countermeasures, meaning it will have a chance to ignore flares completely. The AAM-3 entered service in 1991, but is one of the most modern and lethal missiles in the game. The Israeli F-15, the Baz, isn't as lucky. In the third rank of its modifications, it gets access to the Python 3. Like the AAM-3, it also has 40 Gs of maximum overload, but the Python does not get an IRCCM, which seriously limits its usefulness in top-tier dogfights, as people are constantly popping fleurs like fireworks on the 4th of July, or as it's known in Britain, Traitors' Day. Regardless though, all three variants of the F-15 can also carry the AIM-9M, a missile in War Thunder which has the Soviet mains moulding. Whereas the R-73 has thrust vectoring and very good side aspect tracking, the 9M has a smokeless exhaust and a very effective IRCCM mode. It's basically impossible to flare a rear aspect 9M, and the 9M is insanely effective in side aspect shots. In the same way that the R-27ER forces US mains to stay low, the 9M forces Soviet mains to turn on the deck. The IRCCM on the 9M uses inertial navigation, and basically turns off its SAKO when it detects a flare. In game, this means enemies will have to pop flares and turn in order to evade the missile SAKO cone. Once the missile SAKO turns itself back on, if the enemy is still within that SAKO gimbal limit, it will reacquire and still go for the target. This is why 9M shots in this side aspect are so lethal, as most planes can't outmaneuver that SAKO head in a turn. Most pilots and most planes, to be honest, don't have the capability to do this, and most pilots aren't even going to see the missile coming. Whereas the AIM-7M is pretty mediocre, the 9M is one of the best missiles in the game, and is still very capable of bullying the Vatniks. But what about our Russian friends, our main competition? Well, they are fielding the R-27ET, a long-range IR-guided missile. It isn't exactly meta, but it can easily kill someone from 6+ kilometers away if they aren't paying attention and don't flare. Something that is meta though is the R-73. This bad boy has thrust vectoring nozzles which allow it to pull insane levels of G off the rail. This is more of a knife fighting missile rather than a medium range missile like the 9M, being most effective in slower speed merges. The 9M certainly does have the legs on the R-73, but do not get close to a MiG-29 or an Su-27, as just like the 9M, at close range the R-73 is basically unable to be flared. So, our beyond visual range, high altitude air superiority fighter is most effective on the deck using within range IR missiles. Kinda whack, so why not use the F-16, which was designed to be nimble with good low altitude performance. We've already covered that the F-16's radar is better, and it can also carry the AIM-7M. The 16 also gets the AIM-9M with a helmet mounted display, giving it much better ergonomics in a merge. Well, first off, the F-16C isn't in the Israeli or Japanese tech tree, but secondly, the F-15 has much better kinematic and thrust performance. Whereas the F-16C will struggle to maintain its energy in a fight, the F-15 can just hit its afterburners and zoom out of danger. You shouldn't be getting slow in this thing to begin with, honestly though. Try and stay above 800 km/h if possible. This speed gives you a good level of turn rate in a fight, and also allows you to rapidly accelerate past Mach 1 if needed. The reason for the F-15's monster acceleration are the twin Pratt & Whitney F-100s, each producing 8,510 kilos of thrust, giving the F-15 330 meters per second of climb rate, the highest climb rate in War Thunder. For example, the Su-27, one of the main competitors of the F-15, has a climb rate of 225 meters per second. The F-16C's is 300 meters per second, and the F-16A is 305 meters per second. All three F-15s have the exact same engine and kinematic performance, and all three planes feel fantastic to fly. It's like flying an F-16 with much better engine power, only with slightly worse turning performance. All three of our F-15s can also carry 3 drop tanks of fuel. I'd recommend taking 4 IR missiles, 4 AIM-7Ms, and the 2 wing-mounted fuel tanks. The third is not needed in my opinion. These 2 drop tanks and the 20 minutes of fuel option will give you more than enough kerosene for the afterburning flight to the middle of the map. Remember, you can always drop these tanks for added maneuverability with the drop additional fuel tank key. In terms of playstyle, I'd recommend staying fast and play this thing like an F-104. You have very high levels of acceleration, which allows you to rapidly disengage from a fight, in theory allowing you to pick and choose your engagements. The key to top tier is to not be the first guy into the middle of the map. Just fly around the hills or the mountains and let your retarded teammates, flying at 4K with his smoke on, take the majority of the 27s. Then turn in and clean up as many window-licking Russians as possible. Despite being an air superiority fighter, the F-15 also has some limited air-to-ground capabilities. First, let's look at the pilot. We get CCIP for our rockets, bombs, and our cannon. This allows you to accurately drop your hot sticky loads all over the Vietnamese farmers on the EC maps. And when stock, you can also terrorize the conscripts driving Studebaker trucks to try and speed up that stock grind. All three F-15s cannot carry any rockets, so spamming rockets at bases to cut down the grind isn't possible at all. What we do get though is a small selection of bombs. All three jets can carry napalm as well as 500-pound bombs, both in their regular and high drag configurations. We can also carry 2,000-pound bombs on the centerline and the wing ejector stations. These could be useful for bombing bases, but these occupy the spaces used for your additional fuel tanks. But they could be viable in ground realistic, I guess. The American F-15A, as well as the Israeli Baz, can also carry the GBU-8. This is a guidance kit for a 2,000-pound bomb. Dropping 500 kilos of TNT on a T-90M sure as fuck will kill the little bugger, but due to it being a TV-guided freefall bomb, you will have to approach quite low over the battlefield, making you an easy target for pansiers. Going back to the F-16 Charlie comparison, that thing gets a T-pod as well as AGM-65Ds and laser-guided bombs. While the F-15 compares favourably to the F-16C in air realistic, in ground realistic, the Charlie walks all over the F-15. I guess you could try to perform combat air patrols in ground realistic if you wanted, but you'll probably just also end up as food for a Chinese helicopter pilot. To conclude, the F-15 is a very nice plane to fly. It has amazing thrust to weight at all combat levels, and only gets better the more fuel you burn off. The climb rate of 330 meters per second is insane, and gives you a level of thrust unmatched by any other jet in War Thunder. It's just a shame that the F-15 cannot put this performance to work in its natural high altitude environment. I believe that when the AMRAAM arrives to War Thunder, the R-27ER will still be dominant due to its high speed, but at least the ability to go nose cold after launch should give the American AMRAAM players a chance of notching the incoming 27ER. For the meantime, the F-15 does well enough down on the deck. It still has great thrust, has great IR missiles, and a healthy dose of countermeasures. While all three variants of the F-15 play basically the same, the Japanese one is the most unique, mainly due to the AAM-3 missile. I would only recommend grinding one of these planes. Top tier is incredibly frustrating to play in my opinion, and it is completely lacking in player skill. It's just a furball where the skill has been replaced by missile spam. I still believe the introduction of modern missiles was a mistake for War Thunder, but that is just my personal opinion. Regardless, I had fun flying the F-15, not so much fun trying to get kills with it, but I am certainly not a great pilot. Anyway lads, that's the end of the video. Let me know whether you liked this video more than my regular ones. I scripted this video whereas I usually just kind of fire from the hip. Anyway lads, a big thank you to all my YouTube members. The channel just wouldn't be possible without you guys. So a big thank you to Lola Alfonsi, Tans, Deboa LX, Dr. Bob, Tomster013, RS28 Sarmat, Pumpin, Schlunty, Van Halen, Diogenes, and newest YouTube member, Econ. Big thank you again lads. If you watch this video all the way to the end, leave a comment saying Eagle Driver. Once again lads, big thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.